Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Ms. Elizabeth Eckford, Dr. Eurydice Stanley, and I think Grace is right here behind me to be the moderator. Please welcome our
Good afternoon. It is an honor to be here with you all today. And I think that you will find that your four-way test, as my daughter reads passages from the book, I think you'll find that the students that Elizabeth went to high school with, they weren't following the four-way test. And I think that you'll find that as we hear more about the things that happened, what a difference it would make. Just really think to yourself, what difference would it make if people did follow these tenets? It's always an honor to share Ms. Eckford's experiences with organizations, but particularly your group, because you are so focused on service. And Ms. Eckford has basically served her entire life just from her experiences at Central High, because it has had such a far-reaching impact. The diversity you see in schools today is because of the effort of the Little Rock Nine and other pioneers who paved the way. So my daughter, who is another one of our co-authors, she's 16 years old. This is my baby. This is baby number 1, and that's baby number 2 with the camera. But she will read a passage from our book called The Worst First Day, Bullied While Desegregating Little Rock Central High. And we have some copies here today, so you can get those on your way out. She'll read a passage. The book is written completely in verse, and Elizabeth will expound on the passage, and I might redirect her or ask her another question.
Because I'm too talkative.
No, it's to make sure that she shares something that I know that she's going to say later in the car. I should have said something that I know she's going to say. So go ahead, Grace.
Good afternoon. On the first day of school, I gazed at my new dress with pride. My sister Anna helped me make it out of the prettiest material we could find. The blouse was white with a sleek collar and had navy blue gingham trim. Today, I would integrate an all-white school, and I wanted to look my best for them.
My sister and I had grown up sewing our clothes. We started with doll clothes. My mother had taken some tailoring classes, and we were accustomed to her sewing for us. And then when we were teenagers, she felt like we should take over. So we made most of our clothes. On the first day, I wanted to wear something new. So that's why I chose that. You know, I wore it that day and never wore it after that. I didn't know that people would ask me about it later, many years later. I put it up in the attic and forgot about it. So we took some boxes down with them, threadbare stuff, and threw it out some years later. But I remember before I left the house that Mother asked us to gather and pray. On the night before, we had seen the governor on television saying that he was calling off the Arkansas National Guard because he expected violence. Violence did come, but it came much later. I thought that the National Guard was there to protect all students. That was my naivete.
In 1954, 5 families had enough, suing the school boards for their children's future. They wanted their students to have access to equal education and real opportunity. Their cases were combined with Oliver and Linda Brown, forming Brown versus the Board of Education. The Supreme Court case was skillfully led by Thurgood Marshall and lawyers from the NAACP.
When it was announced that Central would be desegregated the following fall, we were asked to sign lists if we were interested in going. So students in Dunbar Junior High School signed lists, and students at Horace Mann Senior High School signed lists. Horace Mann was a new school. Prior to that, Dunbar had been a 6-year school. And it was very important to our community. Central High was built in 1927 and it cost $1.5 million. Dunbar was built mostly with funds from Julius Rosenthal, who had built one-room schoolhouses throughout the South so that Negro children would have a place to go to school. Dunbar is a brick and mortar school, but its architecture is similar to Central High on a much, much smaller scale. Central High, when I went there, started out with about 2,100 students, and Dunbar had about 600 students.
What was the significance of Brown versus Board of Education to you at the time?
Well, it meant that in some places, the government would allow me to go to a school that had a better education. Because one of the tenets of white supremacy is that there would be separation, but never equality.
In Brown versus Board of Education, that decision was 1954. This was 1957, so it was 3 years before Little Rock even thought about implementing this decision. And even still, as Elizabeth was saying, they weren't very serious about it, because how many students originally wanted to attend?
About 85, and the superintendent said that was too much. He asked the Negro principal of Dunbar and the principal of Horace Mann to discourage many of the students. And he said that he would make he would choose the ones that would go. When the superintendent said that those students selected could not participate in any extracurricular activities at Central, the numbers got smaller because people realized that they wouldn't have a normal school year. It was not a deterrent to me. I call my mother the queen of no. And she didn't want us in any after-school activities. So there was no chance of mine being in any extracurricular activities. But I could go to school, and that was important to me.
But think about for yourselves, going to school, how important extracurricular activities were, and for your children, or for your nieces, nephews, how significant that is. And the students who chose to go to Central High had to choose, were not allowed, period. That was not even an option.
As I rode the bus to school, I felt that I was being transported to a whole new world. With each inch that I moved closer, my dreams soared higher. I wondered who'd be my new friends and if I received my desired classes from my school register. Little did I know that I would soon be entering a cauldron of fire. Exiting the bus, I pondered my bright new future as I walked the rest of the way to school. Up ahead, I saw more than 250 people and a massive crowd. They were quiet until I crossed the street to enter school, immediately sparking into life. Their initial quiet murmurings became enraged and extremely loud.
As I approached the soldiers, I had seen them break ranks to admit white students, but they closed ranks when I approached. And I said to myself, well, maybe I'm not supposed to enter at this end of school. So I walked down toward the center part, not quite to the center part, but there was another entrance to school. And this time the soldiers crossed rifles to bar me. And it was at the third attempt, where I was at the center where the main entrance was, a soldier directed me across the street where those angry demonstrators were. And that's when I finally realized that they were there to keep me out of school. As I stepped out into the street, I couldn't go back in the direction I had come from because the demonstrators surged behind me. And immediately in front of me, there were photographers walking backwards. And the area was so familiar to me, but I knew there was another bus stop at the opposite end of the street. Central is 2 blocks wide. And so I headed for that bus stop. Along the way, people threatened me. They said awful things to me. And I had been trained to look to older adults for help. I saw a woman who seemed to have a kind face, but when I turned to her, she spat on me. And I knew that there was no help there. So I eventually arrived where the bus bench was and sat down. While I was sitting there.
Don't go past Hazel.
Okay.
They have to understand the dynamic of Hazel.
A young photographer named Will Counts captured images that morning of the attack. He perfectly framed Hazel screaming in the crowd, identifying racial hatred for posterity. His photo later became one of the most iconic images of the 20th century. Mr. Counts was also nominated for a Pulitzer Prize in photography. As I continued to navigate through the mob, seeking a path of escape, several segregationists yelled, "Lynch her! Lynch her!" and I took those threats seriously. 2 years prior, Jet magazine published photos of 14-year-old Emmett Till after being lynched. His attackers tortured him relentlessly for the offense of flirting with a white woman, allegedly.
That had a tremendous impression on the country because when Emmett Till was at his funeral, his mother insisted that the casket be opened so that people could see what his body looked like. In Little Rock, the last lynching had been in 1927 or 1929. So it wasn't something that was uppermost in people's minds. But I was terrified. While I was waiting, Terrence Roberts came to me and asked me to leave with him. He had been turned away by the soldiers. I knew that Terrence lived within 5 blocks of Central High School, and that after that I would have 2 miles to walk home alone. So I didn't leave with him because I was afraid that the further away I got from school, the fewer witnesses there would be as to what might happen to me. A man came and asked me to leave with him, and he showed me that he had a pistol on him. I knew who he was. I recognized his face because in his weekly newspaper, his picture was often in the paper. His wife was state president of the NAACP, so I knew who he was, but I didn't know him, so I didn't leave with him. A woman came from somewhere and confronted the crowd, a white woman, and said that they should be ashamed of what they were doing. They were ashamed, and some of them to this day are not. But at the bus bench, there were 2 reporters there who sat with me and were sympathetic, and one said, "Don't let them see you cry." I had the sunglasses on because sun is blinding to me. And I was glad to have them on because I didn't want people to see my tears.
How was it that you were at the school by yourself, Elizabeth?
Oh, I didn't know if there were any plans for students to come as a group. I didn't even know who the group was because during August, the names of 17 students who had been selected were printed in the newspaper. That opened their families up to immediately to economic retaliation. The Little Rock Nine really are the people that were left. We were not part of an organized group. I knew some of them because we had gone to schools together, but some of them I didn't know. My grandfather had a small grocery store, and it was his custom. When strangers came into his store, he would ask, "Who are your people?" My grandfather was able to give me information about 2 generations of each family. But some of them I had no contact with before. We were not an organized group. Certainly we were what was left.
And some received a call prior to the date.
Oh, yes. 7 students arrived at Central accompanied by 4 ministers. Minnie Jean Brown, who had been my neighbor at one time, said that she was walking to school, and when she was within 2 blocks of the school, she ran into her pastor, and he asked her to join them. Terrence Roberts, who lived near the school, just walked to school by himself. I came by myself. I didn't see, in the photographs later, didn't see Mel Patillo. So I wasn't the only one who didn't get word of them coming as a group.
The international media coverage brought in countless letters of support from around the world. If senders didn't know our names, they wrote Little Rock, USA, or taped our picture as addresses for delivery. Supporters sent kind words to encourage the Little Rock Nine, denouncing discrimination and racism. No one knew how important those messages were to my family and me.
I kept those letters for a very, very long time because the support meant a lot to me. I had supportive neighbors. We didn't have police protection. So 2 of the men in the neighborhood volunteered to check around our house late at night. Some of the lots near us were wooded. There was a house on each side of us, but there were many empty lots or wooded lots. My sister remembers the FBI going into the woods one night. I don't. But I especially appreciate those neighbors for checking around the house because my mother had a habit. If she heard anything at all, she would crack the back of the kitchen door and fire off a couple of rounds. I don't know if she was aiming toward the ground or aiming up in the air. But they were really, really brave people to check around our house.
President Eisenhower saw video footage of my attack and was infuriated. He knew something must be done to make the Brown ruling last. He awaited the response of the courts before stepping in. He hoped to ensure separation of federal government and states as in the past.
The president took federal control of the Arkansas National Guard, and he sent more than 1,000 paratroopers from Fort Campbell, Kentucky, to Little Rock. It's one of the few times that a government official acted to enforce a court order regarding desegregation. And President Eisenhower acted after these images of an ugly reality of the United States were being seen around the world. We did get into school on September 23rd. We went in a side entrance where the majority of the crowd was at the ugly end of the street. So it took about an hour and a half for the children in the school and for the people outside to realize we were in Central High School. And when they did, what had been 250 demonstrators was now a mob of 1,000 people. And they were about to overrun the police barricade because the governor had withdrawn the National Guard. He could have left them there to preserve peace and good order. But instead, he removed them, so the local police set up barricades and tried to control the crowd. But they weren't trying for the crowd control. Many things happened back then. There was no Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Bureau. So the school district hired 26 additional janitors to open every locker to look for a bomb every night.
And they found one.
They found one once with a faulty fuse. But we had many, many bomb scares. You see, in the school there was a payphone in the hallway directly across the street, across the hall from the principal's office. I really don't believe that all of those were bomb threats, real bomb threats. Because sometimes people do that because they don't want to take a test.
What was the significance of Sammy Dean jumping out the window when she found out that you were in the school?
A couple of students did jump out of second floor windows. They were not seriously hurt. I guess they bounced off trees or something. But our being there was a direct affront to white supremacy. And when the crowd became a mob, they started beating reporters. There were 3 Negro reporters, and they felt like they had been decoys. So they started beating them. 2 of them ran, 1 didn't. So there's a series of photographs of Alec Wilson being throttled, being pummeled, of a one-armed man trying to find a soft spot with the brick he had in his hand. He was knocked down several times. Eventually, he got away, but nobody was ever been prosecuted for any of the things that they did. And the local police even arrested some reporters because they thought they were troublemakers.
Alec Wilson died a year later, and from Parkinson's, and the discussion was that it was from the beating that he took. He was a former Marine, and he had served in the war, and he said he did not run from the Nazis, and he was not going to run from the segregationists.
The Arkansas National Guard soldiers weren't much older than we were. They were lackadaisical in their duties, so our former security was now past. The soldiers spent most of the time flirting and chasing girls while on campus. Their only duty was in the hallway. Soldiers weren't allowed inside to protect us during class.
The soldiers followed us 11 paces behind down the hallway. General Edwin Walker, who removed Negro troops from the 101st Airborne so that white people would not have to take orders from Negro troops, he told the soldiers in most instances to not engage the white students. Essentially what they were, their presence kept adults from outside from overrunning the school, because they bivouacked on the school grounds, on the athletic field. They had helicopters patrolling overhead. They cleared all the streets for 3 blocks around, and there were armed soldiers patrolling on the roof of the building. So, you know, they presented themselves in serious business. When they dispersed the mob, they affixed bayonets to their rifles. 101st is a special unit that has a lot of esprit de corps. They have a glorious history, from before World War II. So I went to Fort Campbell once, and I got a couple of medals, and I was told that if I encountered somebody from the 101st, I was supposed to slap them a medal on the bar, and say, and give them an airborne salute.
You coined someone, if you get a challenge coin, that you're supposed to keep that on your person, but that's the 101st, escorting them in. And it's significant, what she's saying is significant because there was the 101st and then there was the Arkansas National Guard. And after the 101st had to go back to Fort Campbell, the Arkansas National Guard was left, and that's why Grace was saying they were lackadaisical in their duties. And honestly, they were, many of them, similar in age.
It took 40 years before I realized that a commanding officer had sent an armed soldier to protect me from behind when I was sitting on that bus bench. It took a long time for me to see that photo. And also, 4 local reporters formed a human barricade behind the bench so people couldn't attack me. One of those reporters was a staunch segregationist, but he didn't want to see me harmed physically.
And keep in mind, she was 15 years old at the time.
Almost 16. I was a high school junior.
So she just turned 16 and envisioned these things happening to her. It's really quite, it's overwhelming to think of what happened.
We don't have any physical scars, but we've all been deeply wounded, but we survived.
Sometimes I would stick straight pins on my book edges to prevent being grabbed. I always held my books in front to shield my chest. There were few consequences for their behavior, so our tormentors grew bold. Although most didn't care if they were identified, attacks from behind were the greatest threat.
Some girl told the girl's vice principal that I had scratched her. The straight pins came from my home because we sewed a lot. And I poked them around the edge of my binder and bent them so that they were not obvious. The only way she could have been scratched by them was to slam into me. People stopped slamming into the front of me. Being body slammed on wall walkers happened every day. You just know when it was going to happen. Being scalded in the gym shower happened 4 times. And I remember that we didn't have partitions between the showers. But the girl on the right of me and the girl on the left of me, both of them were there and had turned their water off by the time it became scalding. So, but they were not the ones who left to go flush the toilets so that to take the cold water away. Some things happened a few times, and some things were part of the daily routine.
At the end of the year, officials didn't want Ernest Green to attend his graduation ceremonies. They tried to discount his achievement by offering to mail his degree. The discrimination never ceased. Having lost so much, Ernest refused to stay home and sacrificed one more thing. His graduation was attended by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and more than 125 soldiers and police.
You know, after that year, high schools were closed in Little Rock, and 4 of the original 9 remained in the city, so that a pending court case was not go moot. We took high school correspondence courses. 2 of the original 9 went back to Central in the 3rd year when schools were reopened. There were 2 things that changed the atmosphere in Little Rock. The firing of 44 teachers and administrators because it was thought that they were sympathetic to desegregation. Some of them didn't work in Central. And the closing of the schools. It was at a time when the only option other than the public schools were the Catholic schools, and that was a very, very small school system. The surrounding school systems didn't have enough openings to take care of the 3,666 students, black and white, who were affected by the schools closing.
Why was the school closed?
The governor closed the school after local people voted. They had a choice to desegregate all the schools at once or to close some schools. They chose to close them. This happened in other places too. In Virginia, the schools were closed for a very long time. Some people began to realize that the civil strife there had an economic impact. So the group formed, starting with just 10 white women, called the Women's Emergency Committee to reopen the schools. They worked for a year. They learned to lobby the legislature. These were women who were known by Mrs. John Smith. They weren't even known by their own names. And they were doing things that women hadn't done before. A lot of changes happened. A lot of changes.
Liz, what made it possible for you to make it through the day, every day?
I feel like I'm obligated to let students know, especially youngsters, how important it is to support someone who's being harassed. The support I got helped me continue in school. Now, I was a shy person, but I looked forward to the last class of the day, the speech class, where there were 2 people who engaged me in ordinary conversation every day. And nobody in the class said anything hateful to me. So I point that out to young people to let them know that if they turn their backs and don't say anything, it makes a person who's being hated upon feel like they're getting what they deserve. But if they open their hearts to support them, it could help somebody live another day. That's not an exaggeration.
And there are so many examples of, unfortunately, children who have committed suicide due to bullying, and it breaks our heart every time. And that's one of the reasons why it's been so important to try to get this message out. This book, this effort is to try to promote resilience and tenacity, a lot of things that are just not shared anymore. And it's so important, and it's so critical, and it's a message that we hope that you will share with not only children, but I'm an Army veteran, and the majority of the persons who are committing suicide are 50 and older in the military community. So it's a message that's timely for everyone.
Remember my first day at Central the next time you were having a bad day at work or at school. It proves there is no limit to what you can achieve despite naysayers who attack and berate. Know that I am extremely proud of you and always want you to walk confidently with your head held high. Most importantly, when faced with adversity, follow my lead and walk past hate. Thank you.
Students have to understand that they are responsible for their education, that this is preparation for their future. Sometimes I ask kids, how many of you are doing the best you can in school? And some of them are not. I tell them this is not for their parents. It's not for the teachers. This is preparation for the future. And if they're not prepared, I tell them straight out that they will just be to walk past and discard it. That if they work for their future, they can have a future.
We'll just call the mayor up real quick. We're almost at the point of questions and answers, right? So the mayor has to go. The mayor, come on up. Mayor Adrian Perkins.
I'd like to first thank the Rotary Club for having me here today, and thank everyone in attendance as well for coming and humoring me to bestow such an honor on an honorable person. Thank you so much, Ms. Eckford, for coming and gracing the city of Shreveport with your presence and sharing your lived experiences with us. I gotta start by saying you are a giant whose shoulders I personally stand on. Some places of your story where that intersects with my own life is I actually was able to attend the same academy that President Eisenhower attended, and I was able to serve in the 101st Airborne, protecting American liberties.
Airborne!
And I say that so no, I will not be sitting beside you at a bar. But even bigger than me, for minority kids, for African American children that have used education to elevate themselves, you mean so much. And for all Americans that understand fairness and justice and that an unalienable right that all men and women are created equal, you are truly a hero. So it is an honor for me to read off a proclamation from the city of Shreveport today. The proclamation reads, whereas Elizabeth Ann Eckford, born October 4th, 1941, was one of the Little Rock Nine, a group of African American students who were the first black students ever to attend classes at Little Rock Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. Whereas her bravery and civility during adversity changed the trajectory in public education, whereas her public ordeal was captured on the morning of September 4th, 1957, after she was prevented from entering school by the Arkansas National Guard, whereas we should all honor her life's work for standing up against bullying and being instrumental in the desegregation of Central High School. Now therefore I, Adrian D. Perkins, Mayor of the City of Shreveport, do hereby declare Tuesday, January 22nd, 2019, Elizabeth Eckford Day.
Does anyone have any questions? There's a microphone.
Hello, Mr. Eckford, I'm Reverend A.J. McLean, and I from what you said, because I was one of the first blacks to integrate my high school 10 years after you did Ruston. So I was denied membership and it was rough the first 2 years, so I see you as a sister in the struggle. But in your opinion, looking back 50, 60 years ago, how far do you think we've come as a nation as far as really seriously dealing with the question of race and class?
Those are questions that we will confront time and time again. Real political change is evolutionary, and it takes a very long time. I remember that the older people in my family left country towns as teenagers in order to come to Little Rock to get the best education they could get in Arkansas. Most of those people are gone now. But there are enough people alive who remember the significance of Dunbar, because it was where people were able to take, men were able to take auto mechanics, printing, carpentry, and big bricklaying. And otherwise they would not have had that training. And that training enabled them to support their families in a more comfortable way. So education is always going to be important.
Yes.
Good afternoon. Some of the same things that you've endured, I did as a teacher. It was 6 of us at the integrated school in All City, and we went through some of the same things. But my question is, I'm on the school board now, and I heard that you spoke in Bolger and spoke to some cattle stewards today, Bolger and cattle stewards. What did you tell them to encourage them to keep going? Because I did have a teacher to tell me when we was rejected, but we still taught, she said, tell the children to like you. They're going to change the minds of the parents, and they did. What did you tell the students this morning, Caddo and Bolger?
Well, I always tell people, don't let other people define you, because their definitions are ways to limit you sometimes. And I tell children that it's their duty to invest in themselves, that working hard in school is an investment in themselves. And I tell them, quite frankly, that if they don't do that, they're going to be bypassed. It sounds cruel, but it's true. So, in order to have some agency in their future, they've got to deliberately try to get the best education possible.
Would you mind sharing with us what your day was like that first day at home in the morning and when you got home that evening?
For most of my school years, there were 2 of us going to the same school until, in preparing for the desegregation, the district built 2 new schools. One in the upper income section of Little Rock, so the children of the local gentry would not have to endure the segregation. And they built a senior high school for us in the eastern industrial section of Little Rock. Because there had been many efforts through to push certain parts of the population away. In most of Little Rock, you couldn't have a and attended some of the schools, because one ethnicity was right against another there was no cross the pond, on the other side of town or what. The only, section of Little Rock that was entirely white race was the, upper income western section of Little Rock. Now Little Rock has grown to encompass most of the county. But there are still four separate school districts.
Tell her about when you went to see your mother and what happened when your mom.
After I got to my neighborhood, I went to the Arkansas School for the Negro Deaf and Blind, where my brother went to school and my mother worked in the laundry. When I walked downstairs into the laundry, I could tell my mother had been praying from her posture. And when she turned around, I could see that she had been crying, because there were some irresponsible radio reports that I had been injured. Meanwhile, my father was driving around trying to find me. That evening after dinner, we went to see the president of the NAACP because we knew we needed legal help in order to get into school.
That will have to be our last question because we know that your time is tight. On the tables, there is a newsletter that has a picture of the cover of our book. If you would please go to Amazon and get the Kindle version of Amazon. We want folks to know about this book, and most importantly, when you get the book, please leave feedback, because that's what gets other people. We want everyone to know Elizabeth's story. We want them to know what the face of resilience looks like. And we have some copies of the book, so please make sure that you come and get them, they're signed copies, and you can take pictures with Elizabeth out there with the books.
Okay, let me go ahead and close our meeting now.